Now we're using Thoughtexchange as a cultural enablement tool. And I thought I'd share with you, instead of one example of what we're doing in Thoughtexchange, really how we've progressed and changed things over time. So a little bit about us. For those of you who are Canadian, you probably know us best for the memories that we help people create in our theater exhibition business. This is our largest and most mature business. But you might be surprised to know that we're also one of the top quick service restaurant chains in Canada. So if you think about all of our theater locations with all the food that's available, and we have kale chips. So we're doing our part on the healthy eating. We also have an amusement and gaming division that operates across North America, where we sell and service and maintain gaming equipment to large family entertainment centers. We also have a location-based entertainment business with these large complexes where you can go to game and eat and enjoy different types of experiences. And then we also have a digital media business, and that's a picture of Mountain Equipment Co-op, one of their flagship stores in Toronto, and we partner with them on their digital strategy. So we have all of this going on, and of course that growth didn't happen organically. So over the last 5 years, we acquired 8 different businesses. And so for those of you in HR who've been through mergers and acquisitions, you know the kind of strain that puts on a corporate culture and how difficult it can be to rally different lines of business with different products, different types of employee bases under the banner of one cultural footprint. So we started working with Thoughtexchange to really almost engage with our audiences or our population in a bit of a transactional way. So we started with event-based engagements around Thoughtexchange. And you'll notice that I'm the leader of all of these original exchanges. So it was all held in HR. We were the gatekeepers to the exchange. And we got people involved in really great conversations around, we've got an offsite coming up. What are the most important things that we need to be talking about? Or what are the barriers to performance? What are the obstacles that we can remove? But it was still very event focused. And instead, what we started to do in 2018 is really re-examine our culture as a whole. And how do we bring those 8 organizations together under one banner? So we reimagined our vision, our mission statement. We redefined and simplified our values to try and really get that organization aligned. And that's where we've really started to move forward with how we're using Thoughtexchange as an enablement tool. So now what we've done is we've put the thought exchanges in the hands of the population. So the senior leaders have access to it. They deploy their own exchanges. In fact, I went in a couple of days ago to pull this slide and was surprised to see how many different business units were represented. And so still engaging in some event-based transactional type of questions around event or agenda planning, but now we're starting to touch on other things, other aspects of the employee life cycle that really speak to culture. Things like, what are the biggest frustrations when we onboard senior leaders? Things like, what are the barriers to your performance and connecting with other groups across the organization? So starting to have even more meaningful dialogue and get more meaningful insight from people. And then next step, so where we're headed with this, and I'm really excited about this first one, we're about to launch our roadshow, our fall roadshow, where we go out to our 165 theaters across Canada and engage with the management teams. And instead of asking them about the topics they want to discuss or their frustrations and challenges, we're going to do something with them like what we're doing here today. We're going to actually get them involved in creating solutions, because culture change isn't something that someone's going to do to you. It's something that we all have to participate in. We all have to wear that hat. So by asking questions around the actions they can take to really build culture and drive results in their local area and their local market, we're going to engage them in some solutioning. So a little bit less finger pointing and more holding up the mirror and asking ourselves, how can we empower one another to be accountable for change? For change. And then across the ecosystem, this next one I'm also really excited about is we're going to start a campaign to collect our culture stories. So creating a bit more of a folkloric connection to the culture change by understanding what people are actually experiencing. So what better tool to use than Thoughtexchange to get out there and gather those culture stories? So asking people, what are they experiencing? What are they hearing about? What are they seeing as we really try and shift the organization to unite the whole ecosystem under one cultural footprint? And I've actually managed to do that with 30 seconds or 3 seconds to spare. I think that's a record. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Allison. So really excited for Allison and to be using the roundtable piece that you guys have been doing the last couple of days for beta testing. So this is a wonderful day. I wanted to first thank everybody who's joining us online for our 5 minutes of fame. We do have our second speaker, which is Brian Kedzior from Walgreens. Welcome, Brian, who will be coming up to take the mic a second time. And then we will have our last speaker and our exchange. So Brian, are you ready?
How's everyone doing? So I thought I'd talk about just transformation in general for a few minutes. We're on a bit of a journey, and I've been with my company for about 3 years now. And when I first started and I was new, right when I started, they asked me, "Hey, get out into the field and find out what's going on in the organization so you can do your job better." Right now, so you have to understand, for my Canadian friends, Walgreens is kind of like a Shoppers Drug Mart. Only we're massive. So 9,500 locations across the US, 220,000 employees, 210,000 of those work in our stores. And a lot of them are 16, 17, 18-year-old kids working an hourly wage, or, octogenarians who are on the back end of their career or whatever. So we're not the most change able organization, I would say. We struggle with transformation a bit. And so I'm going out into the field, and I'm a little skeptical about this. I've heard employee empowerment. I've seen a million of these culture programs come and go over the course of my career. And they say, let's go to a couple stores that haven't experienced this movement yet. And so I walk into a couple stores, and the exact same experience hits me in each of these stores. The second I step foot in the door, and I'm kind of dressed like this, right? Nobody really knows who I am yet. I walk in the door, and every single person wearing a Walgreens polo, their head immediately snaps down like this. And they're working on whatever they're working on, and they're kind of giving me the side eye, like it's like the kid who was when we called on in grade school class, right? Please, for the love of God, if he comes and talks to me, I don't know what I'm going to say. Right? And the store manager's in the back of the store, and he kind of pokes his head up when I walk in like a puppy who sees you coming home for the first time, like scurries up to the front of the store to like intercept us before we can go talk to anybody else that's on the floor. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, if I had to come work here every day, I can't imagine what that's like. The fear, the anxiety, the lack of empowerment. And so the person that's chaperoning us around says, okay, I'm going to take you 6 minutes up the road, and I want you to see a store that's actually started to invest in some of these employee empowerment conversations. Same exact kind of a setup. I walk in the door, I get 2 steps in the door, and the cashier physically grabs me by the arm and says, hey, before you leave, make sure you stop. We're doing some cool things up here in the checkout area, and I want you to see it before you take off. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Yeah, great. Can't wait. Walk 10 more steps, and the woman who's working at our beauty counter starts waving her arms frantically. Hey, before you leave, come see me. I want you to see what we're doing over here in beauty, and I want to bounce a few things off of you and get your thoughts and input. I talked to every single person on the floor of that store before I said a word to the store manager, and the store manager could not have been happier about it. Now, that was about 2.5 years ago. We were about halfway through our journey at that point. We've now reached every single one of our 9,500 stores. And if you walk into the back of any Walgreens store right now, you will see what we call a pulse meeting, and you'll see these 16, 17, 18-year-old kids up in front of the group talking about the trajectory of the store. How are we doing with shrink and waste? How are we doing with sales? How are we doing with customer satisfaction? And the store manager is standing in the back, and they're talking with each other about how they're collaborating to problem solve issues they're facing in the moment. And there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of energy, there's a sense of ownership in those stores. How the hell did we do that? We're in a place now where our field is actually holding us accountable from a support center perspective. When we build these change programs and try and push them out into the field, if it's not done in a way that they feel like they have a voice, that they were empowered to be a part of the process, they actually push back and say, hey, no, we work this way now. I know you're still working that way. Catch up, because this is better. The first thing we did is we scrapped the culture projects or programs, and we made a real investment. We went out into the field. We spent 6, 7, 8 months in some markets, in some regions, helping people overcome their own barriers, their own biases, exploring what kept us from working in this more empowered way. We dug deep, got underneath, and we unlocked something when we did that. We saw an uptick in customer satisfaction. We saw an uptick in employee engagement. We saw an uptick in business results, to the point where our organization right now is in the middle of a $1.5 billion cost transformation initiative. We have to figure out how we're going to come up with $1.5 billion in year-by-year runtime savings by the end of 2022. But one of the primary investments we're still making is we're rolling out this employee empowerment movement into our support center, into our distribution centers, because we discovered something through this process. We discovered that we spent all this time in all these conferences talking about transformation. And we talk about how we're going to get people to manage the transformation that's happening to our business, when in reality, the transformation of our people is the transformation. The goalposts are going to continually move on process and on technology, and things are going to Des was talking about the phones last night. For those of you who were here, that's going to keep happening year over year over year over year. The only constant we know is that's going to keep happening. So how do we get our people to stay productive, stay efficient, stay motivated, stay energized when they're working in this environment that's constantly swirling around them like a hurricane? at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So we're investing an inordinate amount of time now driving that conversation rather than working on the programmatic side of transformation with all the technology and process-based things that we're driving into the business.
Thank you, Brian. So I kid you not, I was at a conference in the US about a month ago, and I had to run to a pharmacy. So I went to Walgreens, and at the cash, I had like a whole philosophical debate with the cashier whether the made good balls are actually healthy or it's all a scam in healthy packaging. And it was a really interesting discussion before she helped me find an Uber. And I didn't even know that this was happening there, but I was like, that was really interesting. So, you know, what I think is also interesting is how just as a species, we're so freaking similar, right? We have Cineplex here in Canada, Allison. We have Walgreens in the US, Brian, never met, companies probably never interacted, and yet both are talking about the cultural transformation needed. And then we have Wesley talking about how do we really empower people to be leaders. None of these people actually knew what the other people were going to be speaking about. And so it's just crazy when you think of the world. I know with Twitter and whatever, that there's like movements that happen throughout the world and that we're in the middle of one right now. And I'm just feeling it today. I was like, well, that's a strange coincidence. But you know, there is no such thing as coincidence. So we're having this moment here now where we're seeing that this is what's on everyone's mind. And so I really challenge you to think of how is that happening in your organization? Because this isn't specific to them. This is what's happening to us as a community of human beings right now. And so how are we going to leverage that and also ensure that we bring some of that in there and address it? Because this is something that's happening and it's pretty special. And so with that, I have a friend as well and colleague, Nicole Jensen, who I'd love to call up to have this last 5 minutes, and then we'll run an exchange.
Thank you very much, Des. And I'm very excited to be here today in this group that's sharing a lot of knowledge and experience. And thank you, Thoughtexchange, for keeping me to 5-minute brevity here. Today I'm going to talk about leveraging technology to open communication, boost collaboration, and break down silos. So I do have a question for everybody here today. How many of you have done some sort of employee engagement or employee satisfaction type survey, and it comes back and it says communication is a problem in our organization? Okay, great. So I imagine what happened next was you put all of these initiatives in place, you started increasing the amount of communication and information flow to people. You do the survey the next year, communication is a problem in our organization, right? So what I'm here today to talk to you about is 3 tools or technology platforms that we do use in our organization that we have found helped enhance communication. I'm not going to be here to solve your problems, but what I would like to do is hope that you can leave today and maybe have 1 or 2 items that maybe inspire or spark some thoughts or ideas for you. But just everybody can feel comfortable to know that communication is often a problem in many organizations. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is a platform that we have, which is an idea management platform. And we have a lot of crowdsourcing of thoughts and ideas. Employees have the ability to submit ideas. People can vote up or down. They can comment on it. And when ideas hit a certain threshold, it gets passed on to a decision maker who can then collaborate virtually with people online through the comments, and everybody who has been engaged with that idea gets to take part. We also, if you want to get a little bit more specific, is there a specific business problem or is there feedback that you want on a particular issue? We also have the ability within the same platform to engage with people to get their thoughts and ideas. We also have a collaboration platform. So where this has helped is everybody deals with email, your inboxes are cluttered, causes a lot of chaos, hard to organize your work. What we have found is that if you are able to organize the way you communicate with others, whether it's with your intact team or whether it's with a project team, people are able to choose how they get information and when they get information. So this is an example of my team where we have general communications, updates, announcements, and anything business related. You do see Cookie Monster there. He's not really business related. You'll see in a moment where he really should have been, but that's okay. But what we do is we have subcategories where depending on how we communicate with each other is how these subcategories are put together. This is our social outlet on our team. We call it Life at L&D. And people share gifts. They have food, barbecues, birthdays, whatnot. You can see L&D really loves food. But the whole gift thing is a part of the platform as well. And I didn't think I'd be into it, but let me tell you, I'm a little obsessed with the gifts, and there is a gift for everything. So people really have a good time with that. Then there's the chat function. So nobody wants to get an email in their inbox that says, I'm on my way down to your office. So better to keep those short little snippets in this little platform here so that your email does not further get cluttered. Then we have virtual meetings. Virtual meetings, because there's a lot of remote work going on nowadays, a lot of flexible work options, it's hard to have that human connection. So it's always good to see people's faces, hear their voices. So you're not going to get that same effect with an audio conference call. This replicates the human interaction element much better than that. And the beauty of this platform is that it's all together. So all of the features I just shared with you are in that same platform. Employees don't need to go to different parts of their system or computers in order to access it. And last, so I imagine a lot of you have some sort of town halls or big team meetings where somebody's speaking at the front of the room. And then at the end, they say, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. And let me guess, everybody's got their hands up saying, I want to ask a question. Doesn't happen. People are often fearful or a little bit shy. So this is often reality. Crickets, right? So what we did is we implemented a tool where employees had the ability to submit questions anonymously, and other employees could upvote. And by priority, the person at the front of the room could answer the questions. And what we have found is that the number of questions asked just went through the roof, and employees really are engaged with this platform to the point now where we have to include this in every single live event that we have. So people still ask questions in the room, but people have the option based on what makes them feel most comfortable. And one more thing. Technology does not replace human interaction. And we can't forget the people part of change. We have a wide range of generations in the workplace, and we also have people who aren't all technology savvy. So start small, tweak it, get feedback from your people, support them, and along the way, they will see the value of these technologies that can enhance your communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. And obviously, we're big fans of technologies. You must have guessed by now. So we are going to do exactly that. We are going to give the room a chance to ask questions for any of the panelists. If you have a question that's specific to a panelist, it's great to include their name. So it could be Allison, Brian, or Nicole. Or if it's a general question that could be fielded by any of the panelists, then feel free to just open it up that way. And we're going to give you a few minutes to do that. And then we're going to bring the panelists back up to the lovely chairs and then take them through some of your questions. So, get in there, get controversial, ask some really juicy stuff so that we can have a great panel. Thank you. With so many leaders running through exchanges, how do you keep the methodology fresh and ensure that you don't get that exhaustion? Lots of experience with surveys. So I think I'm going to go with Allison for this because she has run so many. So Allison.
Thanks, Des, and thank you for the question. We don't worry about it. So we are there. I have a member of my team who program manages Thoughtexchange. So we have a resource in-house for leaders to work with if they want to workshop questions, and we reach out as people are running exchanges, sort of almost not by accident, by design, but on occasion. We don't really worry too much about overuse because the nature of the questions and the nature of the exchanges varies so much and are so specific to the line of business that's engaged in the exchange. And for an organization that has historically, as many organizations do, struggle with feedback and collaboration and getting input, the fact that people are being asked and involved is creating a habit and an expectation that they have a voice. So rather than experiencing survey fatigue, where here's another survey and I've got to answer another 100 questions to tell you the things that I've already told you before, now leaders are leveraging a resource or a tool that's actually helping them have meaningful conversations with their teams and across the organization. So we're not experiencing it yet. If I get invited back next year, I'll tell you if that's changed. But we try. We actually just don't worry about it. We let go of that desire to control and that desire to, we let go a little bit of that desire for quality. Mm-hmm. In the spirit of activity and engagement and insight. And I think that's hard for a lot of OD people, is to let go the reins a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really great point, and I want to thank you for that, Allison. It's what are the actions, and that's the whole thing of like, if just one thing happened as a result of all of this, that's more than the zero that most people experience from everything else that they give feedback for. So I think that we get freaked out that I have to do everything, so therefore I do nothing. What I love about this is I would say, well, I'm going to do one thing. Oh, I guess I'll do that. Okay, thank you. So it just gives you that. So thanks for that.
And just to close out on that thought, because you triggered my thinking, over the gong dinner last night, Dave and I were chatting about an area of the business where we'd like to ask a question. And I already have a sense of what the sentiment and feedback will be. And he and I were going back and forth. He was pushing me to challenge my thinking on it. I don't want to ask the question because I don't think the leadership team is ready to take action. So that's the part that from an OD and a support point of view, we're really working at supporting, is less the what are you asking and how are you asking and how often are you asking, but how willing are you to action the feedback that you're receiving. And that's the real, I think, trick to embracing this as a culture enabler.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I think the last thing I'll just throw in is when you're not asking it, that doesn't mean they're not thinking about it. It's not like asking triggers thoughts. Asking just relieves the tension that's already happening in your organization. And I think that's a really big thing for people to understand. Once you relieve the tension, you can actually talk about it. But by not asking it, the situation doesn't not exist because you didn't ask it. Like that's like covering your face and thinking nobody can see me because I can't see you. It's ridiculous and kind of childish, but that's what I would be saying. So, all right, what can leaders do to cultivate a culture of open feedback? So I guess that's always a big question. Is this open feedback? I mean, that's a philosophical question. So I'm going to throw it to anybody who wants to grab it.
I'll start and then I'll push it over to you. I guess in my experience, the best way to cultivate a culture of feedback is to inspire people to ask for it as opposed to give it. That's my 2 cents on
That's
it.
beautiful.
It's all the work that we're doing is based on what Wesley was kind of talking about this morning. It's about creating this sense of ownership. I think the misnomer about feedback is that it's just like I go out and ask a question, you give me some kind of input, and then I'm supposed to now go behind closed doors and figure out what I'm supposed to do with that feedback. And that's a cycle that's never sustainable because there's never enough bandwidth, never enough time. People aren't satisfied with the results, right? So when we talk about feedback in our organization, feedback is something that you and I have a conversation about interaction that we have, and I'm talking to you about how the way you came to the table impacted me and how I came to the table impacted. That's a feedback conversation. When we talk about open exchanges like this, or we're going to ask a question to the group and kind of crowdsource some of this stuff, it's a dialogue that also includes problem solving in the moment. So if you really want to encourage a culture of feedback, give the people the opportunity who provided that input to right there in real time solve for whatever it is that's happening, rather than just saying, okay, here are your top 3 issues. We're gonna go back and talk about this for the next 30 days and then come back and tell you what we're gonna do about it, right? So that's been a big unlocker for us. We actually provided our store team members with really simple, easy to use tools to be able to do that. To say, hey, we've got this opportunity. What's a really easy framework that I can use to pull 2 or 3 of my colleagues into a room and get to the heart of what the issue is and how we can problem solve for it in a real quick 30-minute session. And that real-time actioning inspires people to want to go back and do it again because they feel like there's actually a sense of progress with what it is they're trying to attack, which makes all the difference in the world.
What we've done in our organization, so we engage in employee satisfaction surveys, and each department is given the results of the survey. And so everybody has their unique needs that they need to action on. And what they do is they get together committees or champions that represent the people in that group. And like Wesley was talking about, the accountability going back to the people. And they pick 3 items from the results of their survey and work together to come out, what are the 3 things or action items that we need to do? So things that are within either their control or in leadership's control or whatnot in order to make things better. And what we found is that departments actually moved the needle on their employee engagement scores, and they actually came back and said, it's because you listened. It's because the feedback was taken in. So that encourages people in the future to continue with that feedback or that dialogue in order to make things better for everybody.
I think it's such an interesting point, and I think you're all saying the same things, which is that what we should be really excited for is the feedback and not be judgmental about how you got it. So when somebody says to me, well, we have a culture of open feedback, I'll say, you're getting feedback, but it's going to be over indexing on a certain kind of person, right? An extrovert, somebody closer to power. And it's not necessarily what the masses are feeling, because quiet people can be violently disagreeing with you. Anybody quiet who violently disagrees? Yeah. So, what you're saying is that you have a culture of some very, very curated feedback that you like, and it makes you feel safe. Because we have so many examples where we think we got open feedback, and then we're like, let's just run an exchange to make sure. And it's like, whoa, that's not at all what's happening here. So I think it's really great to action the feedback in an open and honest way, but not require people to give it to you in the way you want to get it. That's not for you to make that decision. In fact, that's not the best decision often for the individual. What activities or support had the greatest impact on cultivating transformation in those stores?
Back to ownership again. I mean, the number one thing that we did was identify the 12 or 13 key kind of markers of what makes a store successful, the key metrics that we look at. So, and depending on organization, they might be different. For us, it's things like sales and customer satisfaction and shrink and waste. And rather than there being this like report out week over week, month over month, quarter over quarter about how we're doing, and everybody scurries to figure out what they're going to do about it, we actually assign ownership of each of those key metrics to those 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. So I'm in a store making $10 an hour, working the register 30 hours a week, but for the next 3 months, I'm responsible for tracking the trajectory of sales in the store or customer satisfaction. I have to get up in front of my teammates week over week and say, we're trending up, we're trending down, here's why we're trending up, here's why we're trending down. And if we're trending down, it's on me to pull my teammates together and say, what are we going to do about it? And it's a little awkward at first, especially because we're conditioned to this model of leadership that we all grew up in, that there's somebody at the top that feeds us all this information, they tell us what to do about it. And so it takes a little bit of getting used to. But once that switch flips and people feel like they can actually make a difference, even if it's incremental difference, they don't ever want to let go of that ownership, because then they feel like they're completely disempowered, and nobody wants to be in an environment where they're disempowered. So arming people with something they can own and control and action against, and then letting them feel that sense of momentum just inspires them to want to hit the accelerator and do even more of that moving forward. That was huge for us.
All right. So we had a Brian one already. Okay, let's just do this one quickly. What would be your number one suggestion for building your culture?
I think inviting people into the process. So again, I think there's a legacy belief or expectation, like performance management in traditional environments, where these are things that happen to you. Coaching happens to you, career progression happens to you, culture happens to you. And gosh, I wish I could remember the speaker. I was watching something, I don't know if it was a TED Talk, and it's the difference between feeling like you're at the mercy of something versus at the source of something. So I would say the biggest advice I would offer in terms of culture transformation is to put your people at the source of that culture change.
I would add, stop talking about culture. It's people are so just tired of it at this point, and they're tired of all the buzzword terms. And like, so again, when we were out talking about this stuff with our stores, we didn't talk about it as a culture transformation. We didn't talk about it as a program. It's just, you just need to find a more human, authentic way to meet people where they're at and say, hey, look, you're probably struggling with X, Y, and Z today. Let's figure out how we solve for X, Y, and Z. And organically over time, the culture starts to shift. But if you say it's a culture shift, people's eyes kind of roll back into their head, and you're already starting with one foot in quicksand, trying to get people to pay attention to you.
And I almost have to question the whole thought of building culture, because I feel like culture is like a personality of an organization, which is the result of the people together, the collective people, and how they work together. So I feel like it's something that ends up evolving organically. And I feel like it's something that's hard to put a structure or a frame around. And perhaps that, I don't know if that's something anybody else agrees on, but I just think that it's hard to put actions in place to create a culture, to create a personality.
I love that idea, that it's the personality of the company. It's almost like looking in the reflection of who you are right now and then who you want to be. And and not thinking it's something that you don't have now, and then when you build it, you'll then have it. It's actually already existing right now. So I think that's a great sort of looking in the mirror. I think we're going to do one more question here. Do you think this starts at the bottom or the top? Top down or bottom up? That's great. There's always a debate about where to concentrate to begin. So if people are thinking, how do I begin to bring a shift to my organization, where would you say you began?
So we started at the bottom when we went out into our store. The bottom's a terrible term, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like we started with our hourly team members in the stores, and now we've actually moved now to getting into our field leadership, our regional leadership, because they've seen, like, it's almost like this groundswell is taken on, and they're like, they see the wave coming, and they realize that if they don't change their own ways of working, that they're not gonna be able to relate with their people anymore. And it worked really well. I will say that the part of the story I left out is we tried to do this bottom up in our support center shortly after we launched our field initiative. We tried going bottom up, and it was an unmitigated disaster. And just because the environment was different, and so without the level of executive sponsorship and visible leadership and role modeling that was needed to show that we were serious about it, the people that were further down in the organization didn't think we were ready to take it seriously. And so we're now taking more of a top-down approach in the center while continuing to push the bottom-up approach. So I think it's all fit for purpose. It depends on where your folks are at and where your culture is actually at, and what you can realistically expect out of more of an organic grassroots kind of a groundswell movement. And I don't think there's one vanilla answer that you can give, because I've seen both work and not work, to be honest.
So Brian, while you've got the mic, I'm just going to do the @Brian. It says, can you offer specific topics or themes that you relied to inspire personal accountability?
We're big on empathy and coaching. Call it empathy is the buzzword term. We actually like to use the term just perspective taking, because people can they can relate with that a little bit more, because then you avoid the whole confusion between empathy and sympathy and all that kind of stuff. It's just about, can you actually, as a human being, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, really put yourself in, not project yourself into their shoes, but actually try and understand why they're asking the questions they're asking, why they're struggling. We talk about this in our change leadership training all the time. To say, look, it's just as dangerous to be super excited about a change because you're feeling this sense of energy that other people aren't. If you keep trying to push that energy on them and not realize that they're not ready for that, you actually do more damage to the situation. So that's really the big thing, is this idea of perspective taking, empathy, and can I actually kind of put my own self aside for a second and try and figure out why somebody's reacting the way they are, so I can help guide them through that journey, because that's my role as a leader. It's not my role to tell them what to do. It's not my role to change them or change their thinking. My role is to understand them and support them and help them through that, which is that's the crux of the whole employee empowerment model, right? Is enable people to go on their own journey.
So I think this is a really interesting one in this culture of no time, is how much time would it really require to shift a culture or the personality of your company from what it is to what you feel or what the organization wants to be, to go from here to there?
That's a really tough question to answer, because I don't think there's one answer that would serve all purposes. I think there are, rules of thumb in discipline, that culture change is a 3 to 5 year journey, that you want to see, subtle changes in 6 to 18 months, like all those different sort of strange kind of markers that we put in place to try and measure the impact that we're having. But I know I've had this experience, I'm sure you have too, where you've joined an organization to discover that it's not a culture fit. You show up and by day 2, this is not going to go well. So it's that intangible kind of personality. So I think we do explicitly refer to and connect some of our programming and some of our rollouts to culture initiatives. We do call attention to it, and we're very early in this exercise, and I think we do it intentionally to raise some of the collective awareness around the desire and commitment to change. Because the organization has gone through moments like this in the past and maybe haven't felt as much support from senior leadership. So for us, it's important to highlight as much as more in what we're doing, but also in what we're saying, because we're trying to change the vocabulary around who we are as an organization and how we want to interact with one another. So I'm not sure there is a real answer around the time required. I would say it takes a lot of focus, it takes a lot of congruence, it takes a lot of of soul searching and willing to engage in the hard work of aligning your actual processes, your systems, your programs to the culture that you want to cultivate. Because as much as it is a collection of who's in the organization, it's also about really reinforcing those things that allow us to be our best and show up as our best selves. So I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I'm going to take a bit of a different approach. It takes 5 minutes. Honest to God, it takes 5 minutes. I feel like the culture conversation, we become so consumed by trying to boil the ocean and solve for everything that we forget that every single moment that we have in a given day is an opportunity to find the culture. And every leader and every conversation they have, and even the way they walk past somebody in the hallway, whether they make eye contact or not, or whether they put their head down, or who they're talking to and how and when, it all influences culture. So if you really, even the slightest shift in culture is still a shift in culture, and all it takes is one leader walking into a room and saying, hey, these are some things that are facing us, using a tool like Thoughtexchange to say, give me your thoughts on what we should do, and then immediately transitioning into, okay, let's actually solve for it right now, for everybody to sit up and go, wait, we're going to do what? We're going to solve, wait, and I get to be a part of solving for it right now, and boom, that's it, the culture started to shift. That's it. And then the more leaders that do that, the more that it shifts, and the more it starts to become a movement across the organization. But all it takes is one individual doing one thing differently to get a group of people to sit back and say, well, that's not like what I've experienced here in the past, and you're on your journey already.
So we'll wrap it up with Nicole.
Oh, and it's very interesting because, that 5 years, I've even heard up to 7 years to change a culture. We had a pretty distinctive culture. I've been in the organization for 19 years. Distinctive culture that anybody that came in felt. So we had a lot of acquisitions over the years. What would happen is either a lot of those people would not be around anymore, or they were expected to assimilate to our culture. And what has happened over the last 2 to 3 years, the acquisitions that we had, we kept on some of those people. And those people had wonderful skill sets and experience that they brought to the table. However, they were all grouped with the culture that they came from. And so we are now pretty much a mosaic of cultures in our organization. We just had a new CEO that started last week. And so we are about to embark what I imagine is a culture shift and a change. So it will be interesting to see how long that takes.
So I want to thank our panelists for this wonderful discussion on cultural transformation, and I'm going to be passing over the mic to our lovely hostess, Angela, and she'll take us to the next part.
Thanks, Des. Thank you to Nicole, to Allison, to Brian for those wonderful insights, guys. Thanks so much.